How's everyone doing today? Hope you're doing well. I'm chilling. I'm back home, so I'm always enjoying that. The wife and the kid are kind of out. My wife's at work. She's a chemical engineer that has a job in our city, and of course, my son's at school. So, family's away, dad's at play, kind of thing. Sort of bored. And I figured I would do something that I generally try to never wade into, and that's kind of talk about something that has a lot of political overtones and so on. And we'll see how badly uh, the reaction is to this video. I might decide never to do this ever again, what have you. So I know there's a lot of stuff up in the air about Springfield, Ohio, and the whole Haitian refugee thing. And I just would like to share my thoughts if y'all don't mind. And I would enjoy hearing your thoughts in the comments if I ever remember to go back and look at the comments. But I've been to Springfield, Ohio, probably about 3 or 4 times over the years. They still have heavy industry there. And the company I work for, we do medium voltage motors, low voltage motors, and medium voltage and low voltage variable frequency drives. So for like automation and stuff like that. So I've been there a bunch of times. And Springfield, Ohio is basically a lot like a lot of places in the Rust Belt. And this is definitely a Rust Belt city where it's lost a lot of its population. I think if you look on Wikipedia, let me double check if they show. Yeah, you can kind of see now where it looks like they've lost a lot of their population from a height of around 82,000, well, almost 83,000, down to about 58,000. So that's, in my head, I could be wrong on this, that's around 30% population loss, which is pretty scary. What can happen to any city and town, and this is not just a US thing, this is a issue that they run into in like Japan and Europe and so on, like Spain. Spain is notorious. If you look at a map of Spain, like a population density map of Spain, the entire interior of Spain is empty of people. And it never used to be like that. And it wasn't until Franco became dictator where he heavily incentivized people to move to the cities along the coastlines, and it just devastated the interior of the country. And I can tell you this as somebody that grew up in Baltimore City, and somebody that goes to localities like Detroit, Gary, Indiana, Blytheville, Arkansas, any number of East Texas towns, a lot of just the Mid-Southwest in general. There's a lot of cities and towns that have, for all intensive purposes, just not even slowly. Sometimes this can happen in the course of a couple of decades, or even a single decade, where you hit a critical point in your population loss to where there's no longer a tax base. And this is hugely problematic because you still have to provide services and you also still have to maintain the utilities and the roads and so much for a footprint of a city that's simply too large for the population that you have. So what ends up happening? Well, you've got to jack up taxes on everything. You still have to try to balance this budget no matter what, which in turn causes the population to want to flee even more. So for example, I'm originally from Baltimore City. I could buy a row home in Baltimore for like 10 grand. Next to nothing. Now I'm going to have to do a lot of work to this row home, and I'm probably going to be in a really rough neighborhood. Let's say me and my wife, we buy this house for 10 grand, and we proceed to put in like $150,000, $180,000 worth of work ourselves and materials and so on and permits to bring this house back up to a livable state. Well, if I go to get this house insured, I'm not going to be able to insure it for the cost of the house and for the cost of how much me and my wife have put into it, I'm going to have to insure this row home for what it would cost for the insurance company to rebuild it back to its original state. So like I'm going to have to insure this row home for like $400,000, even though this row home, even all nice and fixed up, is not worth anything close to that. But that is what it would cost to the insurance company. And then on top of this, that 10 grand that I originally paid for the house, I'm going to be paying all of that and way more, like a couple of factors, a couple of times more than that in city and state taxes or property taxes and so on. I'm going to be just taxed out of my mind. And on top of this, I'm going to have to send my kid to private school because the public schools are such an ungodly mess. I'm going to have to deal with property crime. I'm going to have to deal with just all kinds of issues and so on. So naturally, I wouldn't want to live there. And this can happen to cities. And it's not just big cities like Baltimore. Again, it's one of the most depressing places that I regularly have to go to is Blytheville, Arkansas, in northeast Texas, right by the Missouri border. And there's a huge number of steel mill complexes where there's a lot of money going in and out of that city. But nobody that works at the steel mills and stuff live in Blytheville. It's a crappy place to live. Everybody else just commutes. And so this is a real big problem for these cities. And so what a lot of cities will do when they get to this desperate state where they cannot keep doing what they've been trying to do because the population is just bottoming out. They need to have people. They need to get people to purchase homes, to live there, put their kids into the schools, to pay the taxes, to work in the city. Cities will get desperate and they will join up with the federal refugee resettlement program so they can actually get bodies to come into their city and start living there. And I know you can see all these different videos that are being produced by quote unquote locals talking about all the issues that they've had since these immigrants, these refugees have come in. But if you notice, like I would appreciate if you notice two things real quick. One, they are either retirees, people that are not working in the local economy, that are paying the bare minimum in taxes and so on, or they're people that are of working age, but inexplicably they're able to do these interviews on the street during the workday. So they're clearly not working. So it's one of those things where it's like you almost want to ask these folks, what do you want to happen? Because if you don't have a tax base, your benefits and so on are going to start getting cut. This is why in Detroit or in Baltimore, if you need a cop to show up to your house, I hope you're ready to wait for 48 hours because they just don't have the resources. They don't have the funding. It's a city that exists in name only when it comes to providing services. Now, I know there's a number of people out there that are going, you know what, Smith, it's real easy for you to talk about this. It's not like you're living in one of these cities like Springfield. And the simple truth of the matter is, actually, yeah, I am living in a city that's part of the federal refugee resettlement program. The city that I currently reside in, before I moved here, back during the Vietnam War era, they were bottoming out the tax base and the population. I believe the city that I'm currently in got down to like losing 22% of its population. And so they were having a real problem with abandoned properties, abandoned homes, losing their tax base. The jobs started disappearing and so on. So they started participating in the federal refugee program. So like if you ever are driving through Appalachia, you're going to run into this city that has a huge number of faux shops and Thai places, Laos restaurants, and so on. Chances are you're in my city because they opened it up to refugee resettlement from Southeast Asia. Now, it didn't fix the city overnight. This is the critical thing. This is not a simple fix. Like these Haitian refugees are not going to be able to turn around Springfield, Ohio in a year or so. My city's population did not stabilize until roughly around the mid-'80s. It didn't start growing again until the early 90s. But you go around my city, and we have a tremendous number of people that are refugees from overseas. Like when I moved my wife here, my wife was blown away that there's a huge Polish enclave in my city, and these are all old. These are the families that came in with the collapse, and right before the collapse of the communist rule in Poland. We have a funny inside joke at the company I work at that if you're ever working on a paper project from about 10 to 15 years ago, if you look at the PLC coding, all the PLC notes in the code, they're all going to be in Polish because our entire paper division was made up by Polish engineers that escaped from Eastern Europe. So once the population of my city kind of sort of stabilized and this tax base stabilized, it really did eventually fix things. But what's funny is if you look at old newspapers from back when this program first started, they said the same damn thing. Oh, these foreigners are coming in. They're eating all of our pets and shit. It's the same slur they use for Vietnamese refugees and Korean refugees and so on. It's the same thing they said about the Japanese during World War II. It's the same thing that they said about the Catholics with the Germans and the Irish back during the Know Nothing Party days. It's all the same shit. But ultimately, okay, if you don't want these refugees coming in to like a place like Springfield, how do you get people to move to Springfield? How do you do it? You can't say that the jobs, these factories and stuff, well, they just have to incentivize things so that they'd actually get the workers coming in. Well, if they do that, they're not going to be able to compete with other companies that don't have to do this. So it makes it a detriment for them to be based in Springfield, Ohio. If you can fix this without refugees, congratulations. You have just won a Nobel Peace Prize for economics because you've solved a problem that is a global problem. How do you get people to move into a city that nobody wants to move into? How? Again, I've been to Springfield, Ohio 3 times for work. There is nothing on earth that you could say or do. There's not enough money that would make me move to that city. The only people willing to move to a place like Springfield, Ohio, are people that are leaving places that are worse than Springfield, Ohio. I hate to tell you that. There's not a lot of Americans that are going to trade one place for another place if you're ending up in Springfield, Ohio. That's all I'm saying. Because at the end of the day, for these people saying, well, they need to get rid of all these refugees, fine. Are you going to move there? Are you going to get a job there? Are you going to start paying taxes there? If the answer is no, then you kind of need to shut up because you're not offering any solutions whatsoever. And again, this is economics. This is simple economics. How do you keep a city alive that's losing population? How? If you know how to fix this, you are a very, very smart person. I think the other big thing is, or at least what influences my perspective, I work all over the world. I am an international worker. So I'm usually the guy that for all intents and purposes, the locals look at me like a Haitian refugee in Springfield, Ohio. So I understand what it's like to face a huge stigma with the locals, to be seen as somebody that's stealing a job, to be seen as somebody that is unnecessary, that's the outsider and so on, and to be treated as an easily exploitable pawn in some other issue or some other nationalism kind of thing. I've gotten a lot of shit working in like southern Japan and in China. Oh my Lord, China. The last 10 years, the xenophobia in China has just skyrocketed. It is what it is. But again, at the end of the day, how does Springfield, Ohio save itself? How? Because eventually it'll hit a critical point to where there's nothing there left. It's like nobody forced the city to join this program. Nobody forced the city to join the program. And when you see the video and the tapes of these people showing up at these city council meetings, at the end of the day, if you notice, they're either people from outside the city or they're people that don't work. They don't pay taxes. I should say, they don't have to pay income taxes and stuff because they're retired. Well, how do you base a city without workers? How do you maintain a budget and so on? I don't know what people expect them to do. So I don't know. I have no answers really, other than that. It's the same thing. It reminds me of Charlottesville. The whole fiasco of Charlottesville over that stupid monument that has been, they've been slowly and quietly removing these monuments from the 60s and the 70s, very quietly. And what ends up happening is every once in a while, outsiders hear about this. And the outsiders show up to a city, and then they decide to have a fucking riot. Because at the end of the day, they don't have to clean it up. And they don't have to deal with the local mess. And they don't know shit about the city. They don't know shit about the history of the city or anything like that. They are just there to generate controversy and to have a riot. And I feel like it's the same thing going on with the people of Springfield, Ohio, where they're just pawns in like a bullshit, dumb, like nobody's going to try to help them out at the end. Because again, how do you get people to move to Springfield and pay taxes? How do you do it? What are they supposed to do? Turn into Gary, Indiana? Just give up? That's what happened to Gary. But I digress. I know this is a sensitive and sore subject, and I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just sharing my perspective and my opinion. Like, again, if you want them gone, who do you replace them with? Because somebody has to pay them taxes. Y'all take care. Ciao.